and welcome to the Hickory podcast. I'm Dr. Ann Verdevec, and I'm joined with Sharon Anderson Morris and Wilfred Audley. And we are going to have an incredible interview today as part of our goal to talk about hope, health, and healing in concert with ourselves and the earth. And today we are going to be interviewing Kabir Kadre. He is a writer, philosopher, poet, and a quadriplegic for 20 years. 20 years ago, he was in a car accident and he suffered a spinal cord injury at the cervical level of 5 to 6. And what that means is that when the spinal cord is injured, he's unable to feel and use his arms and legs to any degree. Spinal cord injuries occur about 18,000 people a year, and there's about 294,000 Americans with spinal cord injuries today. All of them need extra help. So just to clarify the terms, a paraplegic has use of his arms, but not the legs. And the degree of injury varies. There'll be some quadriplegics who have damage to both the use of their arms and legs that can do things like walk somewhat or use their arms to do some activities of daily living. Unfortunately, in Kabir's case, although he can move his arms, he really has no good functional use of his arms or his legs. He dictates everything, and he has 5 full-time caretakers helping him daily just to survive. And with spinal cord injuries, there's a lot of care required, and the way the United States health system is set up, it's not really funded. So this interview is so fascinating because hearing all that and understanding the obstacles of someone who is dependent on others just to live, how he remains hopeful. He tells the story of how he chose to live. And you can tell that he has no bad feelings about this or anything. He's just hopeful and positive, and it's so inspirational that with all his obstacles, he's still creating companies and working with others to help other patients with spinal cord injury have a better life. And it's so inspirational. So I hope that you will all enjoy it as much as I did, because the last thing I wanted to mention is the cost that's required to care for patients like Kabir. In the first year, it can cost up to $1 million with the rehabilitation and the hospitalizations. And after that, it can be up to $200,000 a year just for care. It's an awful lot of money, and really a formidable task just to stay living, which Kabir does with grace. Sharon, do you have any comments? You interviewed him and you've known him the longest.
Yeah.
I don't know. Now, actually, one question I have for you is he discussed his near-death experience, and you had one also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thank you. And thank you guys for bringing Kabir's story to the forefront. Kabir is one of the kindest and smartest men that I've ever known. He's trying to take his experience of almost dying, or actually dying with an NDE, and changing our healthcare, because he needs help, and we don't have a healthcare that covers situations like his. Yes, I had an NDE myself. I was for 8 minutes not breathing, no heart rate, and I experienced something that I think we should go into a deeper level at some point, but it my experience showed me how much I appreciate where I am today and how much I want to support people like Kabir. Kabir is trying to make a change in our world by showing that even though he went through, hell and came back and he's fine, fine being his mind is so keen, but the rest of his body is not of use. He's trying to change our health care so that people can live not homeless, but live with healthcare coverage and keep on going, because it's a very difficult situation that's not being addressed right now. My NDE, like I said, was 8 minutes, and I learned so much from that experience that I hope that you all enjoy and learn from Kabir's experience in our interview today. It's pretty magnificent. And what he's trying to do to change people that need help like he does, to get funding from our government to be able to survive, is a very difficult task, especially when you are a quadriplegic. And he's very adamant in trying to make a change in our healthcare system.
Yes. Sharon, did you, in your near-death experience, people talk about seeing white, seeing their family. I know that we may need to go into it on another level. I'm just curious if you had any of the common experiences that they talk about. And actually, I guess they're studying it at University of Virginia. But yeah, did you?
I kind of feel like I shouldn't be doing this here, but I didn't see the white light and go towards, the white light to save my soul and all this stuff. What I experienced was something that I've finally now heard that others have experienced, which is I literally went backwards until I was resuscitated. I went backwards to specific times with my father, my mother, my boyfriend, my sister, things that made me me. Those discussions and places and times were not just in my mind. I went there and I went back to those places that made me, Sharon, who I am today, until I was brought back to breathing again. And it was very painful to come back to breathing and living again. Very painful re-entry.
Well, I personally, and I know many others, are so glad you're still here with us, and that is amazing. But I don't want to delay too much our amazing interview with Kabir. Will and Russell, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, sorry, Sharon. Russell came up to me while you were giving that, but that was beautiful, and thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. Um, I just want to say, yeah, I think that there is some spirituality that is present with NDE, means near-death experience, for our audience, and it's a person that hasn't given up, and that's applicable in many people's lives. Whatever it is that you're doing, for him it was this near-death, crazy, debilitating injury, with grief and other people and all this type of pain, and he still he's still fighting, and that's an inspiration to everybody. That's an inspiration to everybody's lives. That is fundamentally the core of never giving up, near death, almost completely gone, and still pushing forward. So I think that that's truly inspiring from what I took out of it. I also think that he was previously, before his injury, advocating for psychedelics in medicine, which is also very aligned. Not exactly that we endorse it, but is also touched upon in our previous interview with Deborah, and it's a cohesion with nature. So he's also aligned with the Hickory ideal even pre his injury. So I wanted to point that out as well. He's a Hickory exemplar and exemplary individual. And I thought it was a very fascinating interview. So I hope everybody enjoys.
Can I add just a couple of things to that? Knowing Kabir for the last 10 years, when I say his name, I smile because he's such a loving spirit, and he never feels sorry for himself ever. And he's had to give up his car, his home, his everything materialistic he's had to give up. And he's really trying to not be homeless. And he's trying to fight for the advocacy of helping people like himself. And that's the best thing in the world, when you go through something that's so difficult, to try to make a change in the world so that other people don't have to suffer like they do. I think that's really beautiful, and I'm honored to know Kabir.
Excellent. I think we all are. And with that, let's get to the interview.
Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Sharon Anderson Morris, and I'm honored to be here today with my dear friend Kabir, who I met, believe it was like 5 years ago.
It's
And
5 years.
5 years already.
Oh, cool.
And I met Kabir through Project Apollo. He and I are on a beautiful outreach program about the future of healthcare called Project Apollo. And the minute that I met Kabir, I knew that we would be lifelong friends. I didn't know his history. I didn't know what he represented. I just actually felt love. And I feel that that's the best way for me to introduce Kabir to all of us today is, to me, Kabir is about love. And so I'm going to let Kabir talk about himself because I can't do it justice. But I'm excited to, introduce the world to Kabir and to ask Kabir to talk about his beginning, his middle, and where we are presently, because he's had such an amazing experience of living life and living in a way that I've never experienced life before, how he views people, places, things, and our environment and our world with love. So Kabir, welcome today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you,
And if you could give us a background of who you were when you were a child, and let's go through the whole process of where you are now from when you were, I would love to see a baby picture from when you were a baby, Kabir. you weren't Kabir as a baby. You can do the name thing if you want to.
That's right.
But through the transition to where we are now today. Welcome, Kabir.
Thanks, Sharon. Yeah. First, I want to I appreciate you evoking that memory of when we first met. I remember that experience. I remember you conveying that sentiment at the time. I also remember experiencing you as just this force of nature. And, I think if you felt love, it was in no small part just a reflection of kind of the fire hose that you are in the world. Just all the kind of deep commitment and care that you bring. So I'm really grateful to be here with you and to have you in my life and to have this friendship and to get to know Anne a little better and Will as well as parts of your life that are new to me. So where would you like me to start? Just
I'd love for you to start with when you were a child, with what your ambitions were, what you were hoping to do, who you were at that point when you were younger, and what you wanted to become, and then let's go through there through your timeline to today.
I was born to hippie parents in the Northwest I was born in Oregon and eventually moved pretty quickly to Montana. Spent time in Washington, and to not dwell too long in this part of things, I mean, I grew up in a small town in Montana mostly. It was a college town, so it was progressive and deeply interesting. I spent a lot of time with my dad in the bookstore, going for walks, eating dinner at a dining room table that was 10 feet from a garden that produced a reasonable quantity of the food that we were eating at that table. I spent time visiting close family friends on a sheep ranch regularly, so that kind of aspect of animal husbandry and horse riding and farm work, these were, and camping and hiking, these were all very intimate parts of my childhood. And I'd say one of the things most worth mentioning, I think, persists there in Missoula today, is a grade school called Sussex, which was an elementary school, started about the time I was born in the very early 70s, and where I went to kindergarten and preschool and first grade and sixth grade, and then later eighth grade, twice voluntarily because it was a better option than any of the high schools I had, in front of me. And so the kind of early formative qualities were a lot around community and community involvement. That grade school was very focused on community involvement. Everybody, tuition was a sliding scale, but everybody, regardless of income or tuition, put in family hours to the school. So that might be cleaning up or building or teaching or doing any sort of thing that made sure that the whole community was really involved in the process of education. I often joked with people that I knew that if somebody came to our house, I knew I didn't know them if they knocked on the door, because anybody we knew would just show up in the room we were in, And so, so in that context, I had a really, I think, an integrated sense of the world. And you asked me what I wanted to be when I was young, like Indiana Jones, James Bond, these kind of iconic masculine adventure types. And trying to think if there was anything more solidly directive, or when that first impetus started to arise. I think it was much, at an early age, it was much more about the flow. It was not, there wasn't so much of a direction about what do you want to be when you grow up. Yeah.
So you were raised in a local community, close family net environment.
Yeah, both my parents had 4 and 5 brothers and sisters. The backyard of our house in Missoula had a neighbor gate into the yard of the neighbors across, who had 2 little girls that I would babysit. And out the back door of the house was the alleyway, and over the fence there was other neighbors that we were on immediate terms with, whose children I babysat. That was all in a little valley. I bought my first car. Gosh, I don't remember when I bought it from my uncle, and it needed an alternator, which was like a $20 fix. And it sat there for 2 years unused, because the $20 alternator was never more important than just riding my bicycle all the way across town or around town. So yeah, there was an extremely local quality. I grew up feeling like, I was connected to the world, like I was a part of something.
It seems that you've always been connected to the world. So what's interesting is that watching you from when you were a child to where you are, you're not a child anymore, to today, you're always connected to the world. You're always connected philosophically to the world. It seemed like that started but way, a way long time ago, and it just kept on growing throughout your development up to becoming adult, right?
I've never thought about it in the way that it's just come up now in the face of your inquiry. But yeah, it's really true that I can, when I look at that, there wasn't anything I was going away from or trying to grow out of. It was really just there was a kind of a natural holding space. And there was in that, I mentioned in my reply to your message the other day, the even even as I started to mature, I'm thinking about eighth grade now, when at school, because it was a small and a community school, we didn't have a class president, but I was elected to be the student representative to the board of directors. And, I mean, in eighth grade, that was, pretty well above my pay grade to some degree. Certainly late night meetings on a Thursday night, on a school night, trying to decide budgetary things, which I barely understood, but it certainly invited me to stretch and to just become accountable to community at, in that way that nurtures growth. And then as I grew up into my teenage years and early 20s, and for a time got into some psychedelics and things like that, and spent a lot more time in nature, feeling really like this kind of that sense of connection that is tied to place and to people and to family, very concrete kinds of community elements. Moved into the more subtle qualities of like thinking about the nature of things, thinking about the nature of society, discovering what I was experiencing as a profound nature mysticism, where there's a living quality to the natural world that we're intimately a part of, and that grew, onward into. I mean, at the time, it was really a nascent and profound spirituality, but I didn't recognize it as such until later. And in fact, it was just in May of 2021 that I did an advanced Buddhist meditation retreat for a week with Daniel P. Brown. And the teachings of that retreat actually contextualized experiences that I had then in my late teens in the forest of Montana and the forest of Washington, that I just had kind of parked as those were wild and strange and interesting experiences, which will never be explained, which I'll never have a context for. They'll always just be these kind of little jewels. And to have that kind of come full circle just last year was really an interesting moment. And it is the continuation and the deepening and the nuanced sophistication of that kind of oneness, integrative, part of the wholeness process.
Okay, so let's go to your accident, because that was a life changer. Let's talk about that, and then let's go forward to talk about how your life and your focus was after that, and what you learned from that, and where you are now.
Sure, yeah. So leaving Montana in the Pacific Northwest, eventually in the heart of those kind of mystical awakening, I came to San Diego and met somebody who was a Sufi teacher. And it was the first time that I had met somebody who was speaking to me. And I came here to San Diego thinking, I've discovered something in the forests and the wilderness and the psychedelics. I've seen through the veils, and I just need to describe something more clearly, and the whole humanity will see something better, and we'll all have a better go of it. And then I met this person, and they were talking about these Sufi teachings, and all of a sudden, somebody was saying the things that I was thinking and feeling and experiencing, but it was 1,000 years old. And so that really gave me a place to connect to something conventional, in a way that I had kind of lost my moorings in the conventional community, just as I had grown into a teenager and I had seen kind of more clearly injustices in the world and the kind of dysfunctions and war and these kinds of systemic challenges that felt really enormous and incredibly important. So this kind of reconnected me gave me a longer context of human passion and connectivity. And so I spent the next number of years in the San Diego area participating in spiritual practices and learning about Kundalini yoga and Hatha yoga and Taoist yoga and Tibetan Buddhism and these kind of traditions, and learning to meditate and learning to do yoga and you're learning these disciplines. And then one day with friends on a return drive from Sedona, Arizona area, the tire of the SUV we were driving blew out and kind of rolled me around a corner in my life. Two people passed away in that experience, and I was catastrophically injured, spinal cord injury, C5-6 level, neck level break in the spine, and paralysis. And one woman walked away from that experience. And the part of the key of that experience for me, which has faded in its prominence over time, but was definitely significant at the time, was the near-death experience that I had. After I lost control of the vehicle and realized that I had lost control of the vehicle and wasn't going to regain it, I relaxed, and the next thing I had was an experience of darkness and some luminosity. And today I can't remember if it was a vocal question or if it was just a present question, but it was very clear, this question of, do you want to be alive or dead? And then the looking for the answer didn't feel, in my experience, philosophical, but more like if someone had asked me, what's that behind you? And I simply had to turn over my shoulder and notice, oh, it's a cat or a dog. And that was, so I kind of had that kind of one beat moment, and I answered alive. And then this experience quickly came to a close, and I started hearing my friend calling my name. And so that left me in a state of, I'm in a life of choice now. Like if I had any idea that I was incidentally or accidentally born, that this time now there's been a moment of choice. And so the life that I'm coming into from that point forward in 2002 is, it has that quality of something, I want to say, to be surrendered to, but there's more of an intimacy than that. There's something about that moment and the significance of, could have said no.
I didn't realize that you had a near-death experience. I did also.
Huh.
And you and I haven't, no.
We'll
you
have
and
to
I-
share about that. Yeah, go on.
No, this isn't about me today. But I'd love to talk with you also about mine as well, because I think there's so much to learn. You know, we're not alone. There's a lot of people who've had that experience, but what I've seen there are so many different experiences with near-death experiences. I've never met anybody that has had mine, or sounds like that has had yours. So I think there's so many things to learn from others.
Let's talk about that soon. Yeah, one of these days.
Yeah,
There's great research about it at the University of Virginia as well.
right. So taking that moment, I mean, you obviously, okay, you chose life, and here you are, and there's a purpose for you, and there's a purpose for you here. There's a purpose for you to be here in life, to do what you have said, the right things, to tell others about what you know. So let's go from there, and tell me or tell us how that changed your perspective on life, and that leads up to where you are and who you are today.
So the paralysis and spinal cord injury is such a total eclipse kind of an experience. The full sensation of my body from the chest down vanished in the conventional sense from what I had known for my whole life. I was a very active person. I climbed, as I mentioned, and spent a lot of outdoors time and was an athlete. And to become still in the body and to become desensitized in a way. But it's not, I likened it to really, there's a great book by Robert Heinlein called Stranger in a Strange Land. And there's an excellent republishing of that after his death. It's a great big novel, but it talks about a person who was raised as an infant on Mars by Martians. This is written in the 50s. And that book gave me a lot of metaphor. I used the term Venus, but it was really as though my whole body now spoke a foreign language, but not just foreign to this land, but foreign to this whole world. And so I had to relearn something from scratch. And so there was really a full year of kind of eclipse season and coming out of that. And I came out of that into multiple new aspects. You know, the full focus on explicit health and well-being, where I'd just been implicitly healthy and well in my life prior to that and taking it all for granted. And I had a 9-year-old daughter who'd been estranged since her birth that came back into my life and pretty quickly full time. And I also encountered a new learning context with professional development and leadership development. These are, you know, and organizational development. These are constructs way outside of my previous 6 or 8 years of really being a monk, as you know, spiritual monk and yoga practitioner, and now learning with coaches and consultants and business leaders about cutting edge organizational design and what we understand about human development and adult development and systems development. And I just discovered that I had a real passion for all of these things, and it was really deep for me. And so that's become integral to my license, and it's this life practice of witnessing my own evolution, participating in that quality of experience, but also with those around me, and also looking at the world through that lens, and in the near term and the long term. And so that brings me really to today, where I'm always seeking for those interfaces. And how do we, there's a great poem about, I think it's from the Sufi poet Hafez. It says, well, the finishing of the poem is something to the effect of, all a sane man can really care about is giving love. And that's really, like, that's, I find I just keep falling into that well. It's not anything I have a mastery of, but it's certainly, it always feels the truest in any moment.
So after the accident, it seemed like everything, I mean, nothing was easy, but you were able to work with the system and to be able to survive on what was delivered to you as you needed it at that for a certain amount of time. And that's changed.
Yeah.
it's changed. And I think what's really critical about this conversation is your focus now on trying to help others that are not able to help themselves because there's a lack of assistance from any sort of government or state or any kind of assistance, because you need help 24 hours a day, right?
Yeah, well,
And
16
you
anyway, I sleep by myself, but yeah.
I say 24 hours a day, but in actuality, sometimes it is.
Oh, no, I mean, it's the fact that I have a cell phone that's within reach of my bed
Right.
and call for support if I need it, that's really critical.
But you're a perfect example of somebody that is working really hard to make changes in our system so that you can keep living as full of a life as possible. And you have been, let's talk about you've been doing writings, and let's talk about what you've done in the meantime with your art and your profession, which is writing about your state, whatever that state is that day. Because it's a really beautiful thing that I've been watching and reading since I've known you. So let's talk about what you've been doing since the accident to keep involved, stay involved with humanity and try to help others to use whatever they need to use or deal with the situation in any way so that they can survive, so that you can survive. And then let's go up to the current day and like, how do we do this?
It's, it harkens back to that early, concrete community that, when I'm paralyzed and I have caregivers I'm dependent on for everything when I'm not asleep, there's just a natural thing that I learned a long time ago that obviously I'm going to as much care for those people as they're going to care for me. That's just what relationship is about, is we care for them. And so that creates a certain kind of dynamic. And a lot of times in the context of the world today, like caregivers coming in the door are surprised, right? They're coming to a job and yet they find a context that really cares about their trajectory, who they've been, who they are today, where they're going. And I think also importantly, how they are experiencing this ongoing catastrophe of the modern world. And so that's really our shared context. And the fact that I have an acute care need that's really visually obvious to people that look, and that it's economically expensive because it requires multiple full-time jobs to keep me in breakfast. That it creates a dynamic space within which to work. And a lot of people don't have a systems view of the world, right? A lot of people see things a lot closer to their nose, and for natural reasons. And I have this privilege and disposition of where I'm really experiencing the world at a total scale, in the sense of, I mean, the journalist Khashoggi, whose name is back in the news today because of the Biden administration around his trial, his fiance's suit. This to me is intimate, as intimate as my caregiver who came in this morning and was really unwell and needed an enormous amount of care. Like, had planned to be up with hours to spare today, and yet I made it to our call with 15 minutes to spare. And so this whole spectrum is, to me, intimate and important. And so how do we work with and in a way that honors our context and honors the world that we're a part of in flow? And it really is so easy to want to see a destination. And I had a teacher when I first engaged the kind of adult development and systems development studies, who was a world-class, Sharon Fallon, is a world-class climber. And he gave us the metaphor of, you kind of, you see the next rise and you climb to that, but you know that when you get there, you're going to see rises beyond. And so that's really kind of at an essence around my work is, I know I'm not going for anything that I can see, nor even necessarily anything I'll live to see. But I do know that this minute, right now, with the person that's in front of me, who's well or inspired or brokenhearted or struggling or flowing, that's what I can work with. And then always the kind of threshold of longing for me is, how do I participate in a way that scales, that broadcasts in a meaningful way, that practical care at wider spectrums. So for me, that's how do we design systems where you and I caring for one another more effectively gets on those around us and gets on the systems around us and changes those things in a nutritive way. And so, yeah, you've been very interested in the meta-care frame, which has evolved out of work between I and one of my closest dear friend and caregivers, David Clemens, that has also been a practice to which we constantly and continually renew and invite caregivers and those around us, medical professionals, my doctors, the nurses that come to change my catheter, and on into. And that's an ongoing question of how do we translate real care moment to moment into systemic well-being that cares systemically. And this is a long job, so yeah, I feel up to it, but it's not building a better mousetrap. There will be
Yeah.
better mousetraps involved, but it's really about building better culture. And I really think that we're in that place.
And you're really shining a light on the fact that we need to focus on how to improve something that really, it's not even broken. It just didn't exist, you know?
It's just, the whole world is evolving as fast as we're keeping up with it, and faster often, right? And so I really don't bring a disposition or an attitude of failure, like this is the problem and those people are bad and this system is evil and these kinds of things. I mean, I appreciate that we can take those perspectives moment to moment and it can be useful. But when I say the ongoing catastrophe of the modern world, this is an ecosystemic transformation. This is a decay that moves from one, forest landscape to a different kind of forest landscape with different animals and fauna and flora thriving. And it's just the natural course of time and eternity. But here we are waking up to it, feeling the pain of it, feeling the anxiety of it, and feeling the opportunity of it. And that's where I'm trying to participate in my writings and in my efforts towards systemic developments and everything.
So where can people find your writings?
Well, kabirkadre.art, kabirkadre.art is a nice little landing page that directs people to Open Field Awakening, which is the 501c3 that I'm the president and CEO of, which is the place that we house a number of these initiatives that I'm working to develop. It also leads to my Substack page where people can subscribe for my writings. And it also talks about the medical needs campaign that I'm running ongoing for many years now to just maintain the costs of care.
I know that in the last 6 months, you have gone from, just from reading your beautiful writings, which I used to do every day, and I used to read every night because your writings are so beautiful. Your observations of our people and planet and environment are like no others. You're an incredible writer. And you're due for another one. I missed them.
Noted.
But in the last 6 months, we need to note that you lost your house that you loved. You lost the car, not lost, but you had to move from the house. You had to move from that car. You had to move from things that you loved dearly. You have lost, and I do mean lost, people that were helping you every day. It's a very tough job, I think, that they have.
Absolutely.
And the requirements of that job, I've known you long enough to know, the requirements are really basically being loyal and on time and there for you. I mean, and you had some incredible caregivers. And I think you have about 10 caregivers a day. Is that right?
Optimally, a team of 5
Mhm.
works well, and because it's such a relentless job, right? There's really if you have fewer than 5 people, then it's difficult for someone to get sick or take a day off.
Right.
And if you have more than that, then you don't have enough hours for people to take it seriously and make it a part of their life. So it's a delicate balance.
Right.
Truly like that.
So your whole world is again shuffled upside down, and you're in a new place, and you have new caregivers, and a different car, but still many of the same loyal friends
Yes, thank you.
that are here to help you. So, what would you say to someone in your situation? I think to say, how do you go from being broken physically to keeping hope? What do you do to keep hope, to heal, from your past, to have hope for your future and for your health? And this is what Hickory is all about. Thank you, Ann Verbeck. I think that those are nuggets that we'd really love to hear about, that you've experienced and developed in your life.
I had this gift of, like, when I was about 15, somehow it just dawned on me that the vicissitudes of life roll through without regard for our care or longing. And what we have the control over is how we respond. And so, just kind of as an unsophisticated teenager, I thought, well, I'm just going to be happy, kind of whatever life throws at me. And so I have that great good fortune of that decision. At the same time, there's a wonderful new documentary film called Mission Joy, which is about the friendship between Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like, I don't have anything more profound to say than what they said, which is not profound at all, which is caring for others,
Mm-hmm.
which really, to me, from a developmental sense, other is anything that I can put on the other side of my face, whether it's the living room or you or humanity or the homeless person or my friend Joe or Jill or Jack or Janet. It really comes down to service. Like when you, it's the most ancient teaching, when you connect with the essence of love, which is really like Like just like this is one of the simplest questions. Like, what is love? And just keep asking that. And then keep practicing the answers. And it's, you know, it's a bottomless well. You just, there's so much to give. And it's so easy, I know, to feel like there's nothing you have. Right? But all it takes is looking outside of that sense of loss and destitution. It's so easy to feel for any of us, regardless of our physical condition. I mean, so many people are just brokenhearted and desperate about the state of the world. But if you look pretty quickly, there's someone or something in front of you that could use a little beauty. And if it's just organizing your dining room, or feeding someone in a homeless shelter, or changing the world in some meaningful way, it's all the very same. That's where I get hope. I get hope because what is there to hope for but this moment? Like my whole experience of the last 2 years and longer, starting just before the pandemic, was, you know what, I'm dead any minute. Solstice in 2019, I was coming home from the hospital after 11 days there after suffering a collapsed lung in a period of time where I knew this was the critical time that I had to work and figure out how to make a living, but instead I got sick. And I knew I was coming home to annihilation and oblivion. And the road since then has been very much like that. I'm still living right now incredibly month to month. And it's, there's just absolutely no certainty of tomorrow. Like right now, I can afford my life until about halfway through December. But you know what? Whatever it is, wherever I am, like, got nothing to do but show up. So that's where I get hope, is like just the opportunity to love. And I don't source that myself. It's from 1,000 great examples. It's from you and your struggles. And, you know, every time I turn around, you're being knocked down. And then every time I turn around, you're like acting like you've got all the strength in the world. So.
You're such an inspiration to me. I think about you almost every day, which sounds so weird because you're not my husband. But I really do. In the morning when something's going wrong, I think about, you know what, Kabir is going through today and he's looking at it in an optimistic way, and I can do this. I can do this. You're really a true example of hope, health, and healing. And I am honored to have you as my friend. And thank you so much for being with us today. I get to see you pretty soon, I think. And I hope Anne comes with me. I hope Bill comes with me.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. So going forward, what I'd love to do is to say, please tell us how we can help you. Give us information about where we can contribute. You need an annual income of X number of dollars to keep 12 caregivers or whatever it is to keep you going. And we need to know how we do that. And I'd like you to tell us how to do that. And then let's end with whatever your quote that you prefer.
Well, again, just going to kabirkadre.art is.
So let's spell it. Kabir, K-A-B-I-R.
Yep, Kadre. Kabir.art, Kabir, Kadre.art. And the, well, the one thing, let me just loop in one little thing, because it's so profound. I was at death's door in March of this year. And I lost my meditation teacher, Daniel P. Brown, at the time to Parkinson's. And it was really his funeral that reminded me that there was absolutely no place so low that you don't just pick up and keep going from. And out of that, so much magic has occurred. And in the last 3 months, we've established a board of directors for Open Field Awakening, a really powerful board. I'm like blown away, and a clear mission and visions of projects that I've had that are just disparate elements for years have cohered into a real mandala. And so if you go to KabirKadre.art, it'll provide you a link into Open Field Awakening. That's really, I mean, Help Hope Live is a medical needs fundraising campaign. And I exist today because of that. People can go and they can give financial contributions there, and it makes a huge difference. But really, where I want to be in 3 years is working with a lot of partners globally through Open Field Awakening. And I hope people will come and find that and find what we're talking about there inspirational and want to be a part of it and want to partner with us to make that happen. And so this is really where people can go to talk about or to investigate what it means to connect and to create together.
Perfect. And do you have a different website, or is that,
That's really the best one.
that's it? Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
And how would you like to finish this with one of your readings or writings?
Well, Anne, do you have a quote that came to you? Because otherwise I'll just read the one that's in front of my mind, but I'd love to.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Maybe we can just do both.
Sure.
Okay, Kabir, go
Well,
ahead.
I don't have one written down right now.
Okay, well, I'll read you what
I
I've
read
got
yours,
here.
but yeah.
So this is from one of the great Buddhist teachers of the last century. Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche lived from 1910 to 1991 and is one of the most widely recognized teachers of the century. And he says, the everyday practice is simply to develop a complete acceptance and openness to all situations and emotions, to all people, experiencing everything totally without mental reservations or blockages, so that one never withdraws or centralizes into oneself. This produces a tremendous energy, which is usually locked up in the process of mental evasion and generally running away from life experiences.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Really is.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kabir, thank you so much for being such an inspirational part of our podcast series. I love seeing you. You are all about love, and I can't wait to see you again in person.
Yes, please.
And I can't wait to get back to writing so I can read that every night again.
I'll write soon just for you. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
Kabir, I do believe in fate also. And it sounds like you probably do with some of your philosophical comments here. So when I was preparing for meeting and talking to you today, I just happened to be looking at a local, it's a local magazine. And in it, they talked about a tetraplegic named Chris Brennan, who has a foundation, Brennan Rehabilitation Foundation, and his, I don't want to call it similarly incredible journey, but you know, he has less of an injury, is able to walk, and he said he was blessed in some ways so that he could actually create a foundation for others with spinal cord injuries. And he actually awards people every year the Socrates Award. Now, I reached out to one of your friends. It certainly won't cover much of your expenses, but everything helps. And your friend is working on submitting you for this award. So it's, you know, it was just amazing that here we are about to talk to you, and no, it's not going to cover everything, but it's just, there's hope out there, right? You never know where you're going to see it. And I wanted to give you that little bit, tiny bit of hope for you.
Oh, that's really sweet. Thank
Yeah.
you. It was delightful. Yeah.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah,
Precious.
Anne's amazing. Yeah. Well, do you have anything that you want to talk to Kabir about before we go?
No, I just want to say, I mean, just what an incredible story and individual you are, and inspiring to my life, and to, I'm sure, everybody that is listening here today. I think that, you know, it's as we're on this crazy ride of trying to figure out what purpose we are here, you know, things come up that are out of our control, but at the end of the day, you control what you can control, and I think that you're encapsulate that perfectly. You know, we roll with the punches. Life gives us tests, and it's up to us to kind of bounce back and provide, make a good out of the bad sometimes. And you know, I'm just honored to have met you, and I appreciate you coming on today, because you truly are an inspiration in that to me.
Oh, that's kind.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, Anne. Kabir, this is why I love these two so much. They're filled with love. My heart is filled with love for Anne and Will, and I think you know, we all have the ability to make our world a better place if we just pour love into it.
Thank you, Sharon.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.